Hello and welcome to another live stream. I hope you all had a good long weekend. If you're watching live, we had a Memorial Day weekend this weekend, and if you're watching the recording, that's hopefully you had a good weekend as well, depending on when you're watching. So let's get right into it this week. We're still on the topic of cash flow. Eventually we'll move on to other topics, but there are so many nuances and things to consider with your cash flow. I just want to dive into all of those. And if you haven't watched the previous live streams, I'm putting all the recordings up on YouTube that you can watch. And eventually I'll probably put them on my website as well for you to access. So I will be referencing some of the things I've talked about in previous live streams. So you can definitely watch those and get caught up. But you don't have to watch them to learn from this one. And so if you're watching, feel free to comment where you're watching from. I'd love to know where you're watching from, what state you're in, and maybe what part of the industry you're in as well. So let's get right into it. So today we're going to talk about where to stash money you'll need soon. And in previous live streams, we've talked about how much cash you should have. If you have too much cash, what should you do with that? And so what we're going to talk about today is the portion of cash that you've decided for short-term needs. Okay. So we talked about last week, I think it was, we want to look at your immediate needs, your short-term savings, and then your long-term savings and what to do with those portions of your money. So we're just going to talk about the shorter term, your emergency fund and your short-term savings and living expenses and things like that. And before I learned about all these financial topics and strategies, I used to just put all of my short-term needs into checking. And it was just this kind of all in one place and I wasn't making any money on that money. And I didn't have a plan around different parts of that money because I knew that I needed money for different things at different times in my life. So we'll talk about that. So let's get right into it. For those of you who this is your first time watching or joining, my name is Spencer List, and I'm a former professional musician, played all the saxophones and woodwinds. Now I'm a holistic financial life planner for music executives. Not into small talk or holidays, probably because my birthday was 5 minutes before Christmas. And I am caffeine free somehow. So I'll still go get coffee with you, but I won't order coffee. So hopefully we can still be friends. And once I stopped playing music professionally, a lot of my other interests I had time for. So once I quit playing professionally, started woodworking and getting back into hockey. I used to play hockey growing up. MF Doom is my favorite artist of all time, and I'm a husband and father to a newborn. And yeah, so why is a former professional musician a financial planner? I'll try to do the short version this time. Basically, when I was a professional musician, at some point during that period, even though I was living my dream, I did wake up one day coming back from a tour with $67 to my name. And so this was my financial rock bottom. And it was a wake-up call. I felt vulnerable and scared and unworthy. You know, I'd spent my entire life on mastering my craft, and I really didn't have much to show for it. I was missing friends and family weddings to play at strangers' weddings. I was playing gigs that other people thought were amazing, but the real behind the scenes was not that enjoyable. And so I knew I needed to learn more about money. So I started teaching myself personal finance and improving my relationship with money. And everything I learned, I implemented. And over the course of 18 months, I increased my income, started getting paid more. I saved into a retirement account for the first time and actually bought my first property about 18 months after this date. And so my life changed drastically in a short amount of time. And so I realized that by learning these things, you can improve your life. And so eventually my relationship with music changed because I realized that the being a professional musician and making money playing music ruined my relationship with music. And so I had this interest of learning about personal finance. So I started teaching the music community how to do all these things that I learned and improve their lives, and simultaneously realizing that I no longer wanted money to be a part of my relationship with music. And so I ended up becoming a certified financial planner and eventually starting my own firm for music executives. And I do free education and financial literacy for the music community and pro bono sessions for those facing financial hardship as well. You can find all that information on my website, all those free resources. So that was a bit of a shorter version this time. So anything that I discuss on this is educational only. None of this is personalized tax or financial advice at all because I don't know everything about your situation. And so some of the things that I may talk about may or may not be the best option for you. So this is just for you to learn and understand what's possible. And you need to either work with a professional or learn these things on your own and implement them at your own risk. So short-term savings, like I said before, we talked about with your cash, you've got your immediate living expenses, you got your short-term savings, and then you've got your long-term investing, essentially, savings and investing. So short-term savings, this is anything in the next 3 months to 2 years, okay? So that could be you want to travel X amount every year. You have taxes that you have to pay. You might want to update your home or major purchases like a new car. You might be moving because you got a new job. There's a number of things that you kind of might have. If you're getting married, you might have a wedding coming up in the next year or two. If you're having a child, like we did, we had to plan for that, right? This is short-term savings is what we set up once we knew that we were expecting a child, right? So what are your goals? What are your short-term savings? And that's going to change over time, but we can't just have all that money sitting in checking and hoping that we're going to have enough by the time we need it. There are some other things we can do with that money to maximize it. And so with that money, like I mentioned last week, this is money that we want and need to have at a certain time. We know generally like, okay, we want to buy a car in 6 months, right? You know that you need X amount to get that car, right? Or whatever it is your goal is. So we want to protect this money. We don't really want it at risk. But there are some ways to earn money on that money during that time period, okay? So the checking account is mainly for your living expenses, right? 1, 2, 3 months maybe of living expenses in your checking so that you can easily pay your bills, hopefully in an automated way. And all of your immediate needs are taken care of. That's money that's coming into the checking and it's almost immediately flowing out of the checking, right? The checking is not a place where we're trying to make money on that money for a day or a week or any short amount of time like that. So when the checking account fails you is if you have money that you need in 6 months or 12 months or 2 years, right? So for these short-term savings goals, the checking account isn't really doing anything for you if the money's just sitting there. So you're blending your short-term savings with your daily spending, right? It's all in one and it can get confusing. So you're not earning really any interest, especially in your checking. That just doesn't exist. So we're not making any money on that money while we wait for the goal to happen. And then mental confusion. If it's all in one place, you mentally know like, okay, I've got my daily spending, my weekly, my monthly bills, and living expenses, groceries, whatever it might be. But then I've also got like $5,000 in there for when I want to do a down payment on a car or whatever it is, whatever your goal is. And so it can be confusing when it's all in one count and you're just having to mentally think about having enough in there. because a lot of that money is coming in and out of the checking on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, right, for your current living expenses. So it's good to separate those short-term savings out into another place. Okay, so checking account creates a false sense of wealth, right? You already have mentally earmarked that money for whatever those short-term goals were, right? But then you look at your checking, you're like, oh, I've got $10,000 in my checking. But really, in this example, 5,000 of that is for the down payment on the car. So it can muddy the waters in your financial decisions when it's all in one place as well. And if you're watching live, feel free to comment any questions, and I have them pulled up, so I should see them, and I will answer them as they come in. So these are just a couple places to park your cash. There are more, and I just wrote a blog about this as well. So a high yield savings account is an amazing place, and it's also becoming more popular and more well known. You'll see a lot of people talk about this because for good reason too. Most of these accounts are online, so they're easily accessible. They have good interest rates. At the time of this recording, they're around 4 to 5% interest, which is way more than zero. And so you can make money on your money while it sits there, and it's very liquid. It might take a day or two to transfer the funds because it's online. But if it's something like a travel or a down payment on a car, something like that, you can transfer those funds or set up the transfer and make sure that it happens before you actually need the money for that goal, right? So it's pretty much liquid. And there are a lot of good online high yield savings accounts. I always link to NerdWallet. They have a list of the best ones, and you just want to find the ones with a high interest rate, FDIC insured, and have a good user interface. Something that's really easy to use where you can get the app on your phone and make transfers. For those of you, a little side note that I experienced recently, for those of you who own your own business, some of them do not like when you transfer funds from a business checking to a high yield savings account. I tried to do that to set aside my taxes, and they did not like that. So my cash flow system's a little bit different to get around that. So just keep that in mind. A money market account, they might have better rates, they might not. You just have to look and see, but they might have some restrictions. So this would be like at a credit union, and a lot of money market accounts, they'll have like a debit card or a checking. So it's a little bit different, whereas a high yield savings account, all it is a place to park your money and make interest, and you have to just transfer that money to access it. Whereas a money market account, you might have a debit card, or you can write checks directly from the account. Short-term CDs or treasury bills, so certificate of deposits, those lock you into a time period. So depending on what the rate is, let's say you want to remodel your home for $15K, and you're going to start in 6 months, and the 6 months CD rate is favorable. As long as you're okay locking up that money where you can't touch it for 6 months, and the rate is worth it and favorable, like I said, then it might make sense to do that. Otherwise, you can just do a high yield savings account. So it really depends on what the goal is, how much, how much interest will you really generate from that, and is it worth the hassle of setting up? And then there's a few other ones as well, but it really depends on your situation. So it depends on the goal, depends on how much, and depends on when you need the money. But all of these generate interest on the money while it sits there, whereas your checking, it's not at all, right? So if you have sinking funds like a travel fund or childcare, so the ones we have, these are savings accounts for specific goals. So we have a travel fund, we have a child fund. Ever since we knew we were expecting, we created an account, savings account for that, and started saving into it on a regular basis. We have a new car account as well to get ready for when one of our cars needs to be replaced. We're ahead of that, right? We're saving towards that new goal. So that's a sinking fund, right? You're sinking all your money into that for that goal. And then when you get there, you use it to pay for said goal. And the travel one, it's kind of a yearly, we kind of keep replenishing it. We just reimburse ourselves. Anytime we do travel, we just reimburse ourselves from that sinking fund. Anything for childcare stuff, we'll just pay for it and then take out of that childcare fund. But all of those for us are in a high yield savings account. So all that money's generating interest while it sits there. But name them, right? Ours, we don't say Cancun trip 2026, but ours just our travel, child, and new car. We know what those are for. Technically, financially, it's all the same money. And technically, it's in 3 different accounts. But seeing it really helps you understand how close you are to that goal and how much is in there. It really helps your decision making around whatever it might be. We just had to make decisions around daycare, and looking at those accounts factored into that decision, right? Create physical separation. So our high yield savings is it's at an online bank that's different than our regular checkings and savings and business checking and savings. And it just kind of helps mentally to separate that money to where it's not all at the same place. And even though it is technically relatively just the same in terms of accessibility, it does feel like there is separation there, right? That's really for those purposes and those goals. I forgot to mention, we also have a tax savings one as well. But separating it out, right? Those live somewhere else. They're not in our checking and they're not linked. When I log into my regular bank, I'm not seeing those savings accounts, right? So there is some mental benefit to doing that. And then automatic transfers. I've talked about this in the past. Depends on what your cash flow system is. So definitely check out one of the previous live streams where I talk about setting up a cash flow system. But certain things that you can automate and what you shouldn't automate, I've written a blog about that as well. And so setting up for these short-term savings, we have automated transfer set up for those things. And one thing you could do is if okay, I want to save up $30K for a new car. And I want to pay for the whole car in all cash. I don't want to do a down payment. I don't want to finance it. And I need that car in 5 years. Right? You can do the math and you can say, okay, then I need to save this much a month over those 5 years to get to $30K, right? You can reverse engineer the numbers and then set up an automatic transfer so that anytime, if it's monthly, it happens, you don't even ever think about it. And by the time you get there, the money's there. There is just something different about your money being automated, aligned with your goals and your values and priorities. And then track your progress. So I don't recommend checking it every day. The whole point of improving your financial situation is that you are living your life and you're living a fulfilled life. And I don't think a fulfilled life includes thinking or worrying or stressing about your money every day. So when you have everything set up, that frees you up to do the things you enjoy, be with the people that you love, right? But we do want to check in. Okay, how's this doing? And it'll feel good when you check because you're already on track, right? But you just want to double check, not just your short-term accounts, but obviously your entire financial situation. Check in once a month, once a quarter, whatever works for you to make sure everything is on track. And, your goals will change, your situation will change for many different reasons. Life is always changing. The plan is always changing. So when you check in, you can make changes to whatever you've set up for yourself. Okay, resist investment temptation. So the rule of thumb that I like to tell people is that any money you need in the next 5 years is not money we want to put at risk in the market. Because, and I've even had people share their experiences with me where they knew that their home needed a repair. They knew that other homes were having a similar issue and that their house was going to have that issue. And they knew exactly how much it would cost. It was a big repair that all the houses were kind of suffering from because of the way they were built in the year they were built. And they knew kind of in the next year or two, they're going to get this big bill to do this repair. I mean, it was almost guaranteed. They basically knew what it was going to cost and when it was going to happen. And instead of putting that money into high yield savings or even in their checking, they invested the money. And what happens is, they may or may not have even invested it in a diversified way. The investments dropped significantly right before they needed the money for the repair. And so, investments take a long time to get to their average returns. So yes, over the long term, investments have proven to do well. But the key word there is long term. That's why we don't put short term savings into the market, because that roller coaster ride is too stressful. Another example is people who want to save for a down payment on their home, right? And let's say it's $100,000 that they need for the home. And they put it all in their investments, and it comes time to go to the closing table. And for whatever reason, that morning, the market drops, their investments are now down to $80,000. But they need $100,000, and they're driving to the closing table right now to sign off and have that check ready, but they don't have the money. I mean, talk about the stress of, not getting your dream home or whatever it is you're doing, right? So be wary of this, and we've talked about this in previous live streams of you need a use date of every bucket of money, and that will help you determine whether to invest that money or not. Okay? So we're not going to take as much risk for money we need and know we need in the short term. But like I said previously, you can still make money on that money. We're just not putting it at as much risk because we know we need that money in the next year or two. Okay? So when it goes wrong, using high interest debt. So if we don't have the savings for those things that we need, it's really easy to use a credit card. And credit card rates are skyrocketing. They're like 30% now, 35% interest. I mean, that will destroy your financial future just like that, right? And like I mentioned before, if you are relying on your investments to reach these savings goals and you don't have the money, you might be encouraged to use a credit card to cover that gap. And if we're in that situation, we might not be in a situation to pay that credit card, and then we're accumulating debt at a rapid pace, and bad debt at that. Untimely investment sales. So like I mentioned, you might be locking in losses if you've invested that money that you knew you needed in a year or two. And also you might be creating a tax event. So it really depends, and there's a lot of complexity around there. And then of course the stress. So we definitely want to reduce that for things we know we need money for. And then constant worry, right? There's uncertainty. We don't have a plan. You're second guessing every decision because it's all in your checking. You don't know if you have enough because you need in 3 months, you need this, in 2 years, you need this. So that's why we want to separate, right? Our daily, monthly living expenses recurring with our short-term savings. Those should be separated. So this is an example of about $40,000 of known short-term goals, okay? And how we separated them out. So $15,000 went into a high yield savings account for taxes. $10,000 went into a money market for an upcoming trip, and $15,000 went into a 6-month CD for a kitchen renovation. And then they got the peace of mind, right? They're no longer micromanaging, and they gain the confidence that all their money is where it needs to be, and it's earning while it's sitting there, and it's going to be there ready for those specific goals. So you're really giving your savings purpose instead of, imagine just having 40K in your checking, right? There's a big difference there, not only financially, but just peace of mind wise. So feel free to ask your questions in the comments, or you can, on the next slide, I'll show you how you can get in touch with me. But if you are a music executive or just a high earner and executive in the entertainment industry, it honestly doesn't matter. And you're looking for someone to help you with your financial plan, this is a fraction of your entire plan. I am flat fee, advice only, and holistic. So a little bit different than most planners out there, but feel free to schedule a free consultation, see if we're a good fit at motifplanning.com. And if we're not, I will recommend you to someone who is a good fit. So I'd love to hear your story, what your financial concerns are, and help you however possible, whether that's working with me or someone else or doing it yourself. Happy to answer all your questions. So, and then let's see, the last thing is if you want to get in touch. So I have my blog, a lot of resources, a lot of tools at motifplanning.com. You can follow me. I'm mainly on LinkedIn, but I'm everywhere else as well at Spencer List. I'm recording a video every day. And you can email me at spencer@motifplanning.com, or you can subscribe to my newsletter. If you go to the website, it's at the bottom of every page. And I think if you scroll, a pop-up will come up. But I'm sending out newsletters and a lot of free resources and education as well. So I hope this was helpful, and we'll see. I'm planning on continuing to do these weekly, but it just depends on the engagement and if you enjoy this. So please feel free to let me know what you thought. If you found it useful, it helps me understand what and how you want to learn these things and how I can help you. So right now we're doing the live stream thing. We've tried other things in the past, but yeah, I think that's it. So I'll stick around for a minute to see if there's any questions. We're going to go to the little outro slide here, but I'll still be here checking the comments to see. And I hope you all have a great day and talk soon. Keep thriving.